the middle of our annual Faith and Film series. Over this entire month of August, we're going to be exploring several really extraordinary films and asking the question, where is God in these films? There's an assumption that follows us through this series, and that is that if we would pause and if we would look and if we would listen, then God wants to speak to us all the time. That if we would just pay attention a little bit, that God is available, God is speaking. And so I want to turn our attention to our film. It's a really interesting film. It's called No Impact Man. It basically is the story of a man and his family, Colin and his family. They decide to enter into an experiment in which they try to live an entire year without having any negative impact on the environment. And it's actually a really fun, it's comical, it's informative, it's inspiring. We're going to see the trailer here in just a moment, but I do want to make just a quick little disclaimer, and that is that these are two Northeasterners, these are New Yorkers, and so even in the trailer, there are two words that we wouldn't normally say. They're not horrible words, but they're not words that we would say normally in this context, and so you have been forewarned. Let's take a look at the trailer.
My first question.
All right, so would you say this simple phrase with me? My life has impact. It's unavoidable. Your life will have impact on the world around you. It doesn't matter where you live. If you live in the city, if you live in the suburbs, if you live in the country, your life will have impact. It'll have impact on people, on your friends and your family and your colleagues. It'll have impact on society and on culture, and it'll have impact on the environment. You realize that sitting in your seat right now, you're impacting the environment. If you're breathing, anybody breathing? Okay, you are impacting the environment. You are breathing in oxygen and you're exhaling carbon dioxide. You're impacting the environment. And so the No Impact family, I'm calling it the family because, you know, the wife and kids, that wife and daughter, they got dragged into this. You saw it in the trailer. It was kind of funny. He made the commitment and then kind of dragged them in, and she didn't really like it until the end, until they were seeing some of these amazing benefits. So the No Impact family is asking us to consider, first of all, are we aware of the relationship that we have with the environment? Are we just aware? Do we walk around aware that there is a relationship and an impact? And then secondly, how can we reduce the negative side, the negative impact on the environment, our negative impact on the environment? And then a third question I'm going to add, and that is, are we aware of how the scriptures guide us? Are we aware of the original intention of the relationship, this relationship that does exist between humanity and the natural world? So let's just jump right in. Right at the very, very beginning of the scriptures, Genesis chapter 1, starting off there in verse 24. And God said, "Let the land produce living creatures according to their kinds, the livestock, the creatures that move along the ground, and the wild animals, each according to its kind." And it was so, and God made the wild animals according to their kinds, the livestock according to their kinds, and all the creatures that move along the ground according to their kinds. And God saw that it was good. Then God said, "Let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air, over the livestock and all the wild animals, and over all the creatures that move along the ground." So God created mankind in his own image, and in the image of God he created them, male and female he created them. God blessed them and said to them, "Be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the sky and over every living creature that moves on the ground." I don't know about you, but as I was reading that probably familiar text, my eyes were drawn to two different words. Were your eyes drawn to two particular words? These two words kind of describe and they've kind of shaped the way that we understand our relationship, humanity's relationship with the natural world. Rule. We were to rule over. You also can translate it as have dominion. And then the second one is actually this rule right here, actually subdue. That's the other one. Rule and subdue. So what is exactly the intention behind these two words? Is it as it sounds? Now there's a common indictment against the Christian scriptures. And that is that it creates a narrative that supports the subjugation of the environment for the benefit of humanity. That basically the natural world just really exists for us, for our consumption, for our enjoyment. We rule and we subdue. And yet, a closer look reveals something very different. One of the foremost scholars in biblical theologian, this is Walter Brueggemann. You might have heard his name, but he's a brilliant and worldwide scholar. So this is his take on this particular passage. He says the rule, and actually the rule is the one that he's referring to in the scripture, the rule here mandated is with reference to the animals and then to the natural world, the dominance that is that of a shepherd who cares for, tends, and feeds the animals. Our dominion does not have to do with exploitation and abuse, but rather with securing the well-being of every other creature, bringing the promise of each to full fruition. So for us to understand the relationship and the impact of this relationship between humanity and the natural world, we have to apply this image of the shepherd. That is ultimately what the original writer was pointing to. Now, we don't see shepherds and herds on hillsides the way that they did, but they, back in the day, they understood the relationship between a shepherd and the herd or the sheep. And it was a very reciprocal relationship. The shepherd was the caretaker for the sheep. The shepherd was dependent upon the herd or the sheep for his own livelihood. If there was something that happened to the sheep, then the livelihood and the very existence of the shepherd would have been put into jeopardy. And the exact same thing was true of the sheep. The sheep to the shepherd, the sheep couldn't exist on their own. They actually were pretty helpless on their own, but they were completely dependent upon the protection and the provision of the shepherd, and so they were actually in this very reciprocal relationship. They depended on each other. So let me ask you a question. How are we doing in this shepherd relationship between humanity and the natural world? Ezekiel writes this to the nation of Israel. This is what the sovereign Lord says: "Woe to you, shepherds of Israel, who only take care of yourselves. Should not shepherds take care of the flock? You eat the curds, clothe yourselves with the wool, and slaughter the choice animals, but you do not take care of the flock. You have not strengthened the weak or healed the sick or bound up the injured. You have not brought back the strays or searched for the lost. You have ruled them harshly and brutally." I don't think that there's a lot of explanation that needs to kind of follow that kind of a critique of the relationship between the nation of Israel and the flock. So let me add one more thing before Elaine comes up. As followers of Jesus, we need to understand what the intention behind the word rule and dominion. We need to have rule or express rule and dominion the way that Jesus ruled. So can you help me out with how did Jesus express dominion? How did Jesus rule? Can somebody help me with that? I'm sorry? With compassion? Yes. There's another word I'm looking for, very similar to what he's saying right here. How did Jesus rule? With love, but he ruled as a servant. There we go. There we go. And so our idea of this relationship, especially as it was modeled by Jesus, the relationship between humanity and the environment, if we are to rule or have dominion over creation the way that Jesus modeled it for us, then we would be stewards, that we would be those serving the environment and then being served by the environment. That was a natural, dynamic relationship that was intended from the beginning. So let me ask Miss Elaine Kimsey to come up and join me. Let's turn our attention towards the No Impact Man. How many of you guys watched No Impact Man? Okay, so a handful of you guys did. Good, good. Elaine is somebody that's very, very informed in environmentalism. She is definitely somebody that prioritizes our call to take care of creation, and she's also the head of our green team, our creation care team here at Kingwood Christian Church. What was just your initial kind of just response to No Impact Man? Did you like it?
I thought it was funny. And I thought, it really tells us where we are, that we want to do good, and we just struggle. Old habits are hard to break. Have you noticed? And it just tells us about how we struggle with some of the hard things in life. And that God is there with us in the struggle. So that's basically.
Sometimes in these documentaries, you feel like you're being beaten over the head with some really, really hard information, right? Anybody feel that way? Like you're shamed to death by some of these documentaries, but it didn't feel that way. Because you had this dynamic relationship between Colin and his wife, and she made it so funny and accessible to be able to just say, hey, I'm kind of addicted to, like the triple, espresso, right? I mean, or to the TV, or I kind of like these things. It's really kind of hard. And so she made it really fun and accessible, but this was also a really kind of inspiring film as well. And so let's turn our attention towards how did we hear from God? How did God show up in the film? I want you to think about that for a moment. Before Elaine has some examples, and I do as well. What were some of yours? Did you when you watched the film, did you kind of key in and think about ways that God kind of shows up in the film? Anybody have one? Yeah. Jaslyn? I'm sorry? Oh, yeah, absolutely. There was a bringing together of the family. Not only were they better parents, we're actually going to touch on that in just a moment, but the family was drawn together by this experience. They definitely were challenged at different points. We thought that there might be a breaking at different points. So Elaine, tell me, what was one of the first things that you saw? How did God show up?
The very first thing that I thought about is that it's the way we are created. It's the way we are created. We are created with a love for creation. We're drawn to it. People who see a lot of green are healthier. Did you know that? They've shown that. Scientists have shown that. So that was the first thing, and then God created us with innate curiosity. All you have to do is watch a newborn baby to see that. And
I thought it was really just to interject real quick. I thought it was really great. Like it takes curiosity for Colin to even ask the question.
Yeah.
Like for it to even pop up in his own mind of like, well, what if I did this? I mean, it's kind of this crazy proposition that he brings to his wife. What would it take to live an entire year without negative impact on the environment around me? And ultimately, there was some sacrifices, and there were some boundary lines that we draw as to what we're willing to do and not willing to do. I'm kind of alluding to one specific point where they were trying to give up toilet paper.
Oh. I am not giving up my toilet paper. Just so you know.
That was one of Elaine's hard and fast rules, not giving up toilet paper. But they gave up electricity. They changed the way that they bought their food. They considered the way that they got around town. There were all kinds of different things that they had to sacrifice, but then there were benefits of their curiosity as well.
Yeah, yeah. And the other thing is that we're created as social creatures. We need other people. And because of that, we need to matter. We want to matter to other people. They matter to us. And that's just in our DNA. And I could see that woven in one way and another through the friends, through the helpers, through the people who were doubters, you know. It matters. We want to matter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think that we probably experienced, we had to unplug during the COVID months, or for some of us it was years. And we reconnected, some of us, with our families in different ways because of that. There were some benefits of unplugging. And we see that in the film as well, that their relationships became that much more strong. They were challenged a little bit. I know there probably wasn't any intention in any of our homes, really, but no tension in your homes, right?
No.
None? Oh, yeah, and there wasn't any in mine, too. We were just...
There's a gentleman over here who seemed to want to say something.
Yeah, Jeff? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah.
I saw that man, the city gardener. I saw him as one of God's angels, coming to give messages to this whole family. So, you know, that's one of the places that was big for me.
Did you feel like at the end where they turned back on the electricity, there was almost kind of like, oh, you know, the experiment is over. And then they had to decide what they're going to continue. But they realized these benefits. They were so tangible for them. So I definitely found God. Where else did you find God, Elaine?
Oh, in all the angels that God sent to help them through this. There wasn't just the city gardener. There was even the doubter, the woman who had the blog, who thought he was just wasting his time and all in it.
Publicity stunt.
Publicity stunt and that sort of thing. And she came around. She realized he was sincere about it. And that made an impact on her. She gave a message that, you know, people can change their minds, but that we need to be cognizant of the way other people think too, because they aren't always experiencing the same things that we are, and they weren't raised the same way we were, and that sort of thing. So I think there were lessons learned on both sides of that one.
Yeah, Linda? Is it a little complicated? Isn't that consistent with life, right? It's not as though we just find the truth, well, it's not that way, it's this way. No, there's actually... Yes.
Well,
I
see,
think... Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and the thing is that in certifying for organic, the original idea was to cut the antibiotics because farmers were giving the animals antibiotics whether they were sick or not. And so it is complicated. Well, okay, we're not going to do that, but what about when they're sick? So we have to be open to everybody and what their experience is.
Yeah. I think that the film also fosters something inside, I think, all of us, which is that we all want to make a difference for good.
Yeah.
I think all of us do. But they encountered some doubters, right? Because, oh, shoot, you know, just your little thing's not going to make any difference. You're just a publicity stunt guy. You'll be on to the next thing. And he really, was there a part of that inside of him? He didn't mask that. But then the more he lived into this, the more he started believing in it as well. And so there were doubters that, criticized him and wrote different things about him. But then there were also, he started garnering the supporters that say, okay, I'm going to kind of come alongside this guy. I'm going to support what he's trying to do. I'm going to believe as well that hey, we can make an impact together, just one person at a time.
Well, and in the end, they realized that trying to live friendlier as a part of the environment instead of something separate, that they actually had benefits, that they felt better, they were healthier, they were happier. And there were things that they started doing during the experiment they weren't willing to give up once they had started. So I found that really inspiring, and it's like, God created us to be part of this. He created the whole creation, not just us. And it all fits together. We're happier when we're in tune with that.
And I think that God is active in helping us. As if we were to try to say today, what is our response to this? What can we do? I think God wants to help us to know that we can have a positive impact. And that's what I want us to turn to now, there are 3 different ways that our church is specifically working on trying to have impact, trying to be healthy in our relationship between ourselves and the environment. What are those 3 ways?
Reduce waste, which the amount that we waste as a consumer society is just downright scandalous. We need to shop wisely, and we need to repair the damage in ways that we can. For example, reducing waste. Just asking myself, when I see something that's I have a penchant to buy things that are pretty because I just like them. But I ask myself, but do I need this? And, meditating a little bit on that in the last few months, I've come to understand that I can totally appreciate beautiful things, the crafting that other people, the artistry that people have put into their products. I can totally appreciate it. I don't have to own it to appreciate it. I can just appreciate it.
Yeah. One of the examples of the second one, shop wisely. I learned. I just did some research on what are the benefits of buying organic. And I know that there's a lot of information out there that'll kind of say, oh, well, buying organic doesn't make any difference and all that. But if you dig into it a little bit, and I know Elaine has, we found these benefits. A very reliable source was talking about how there are no chemicals, I've experienced better taste, especially in fruits. I've experienced better taste. There's no hormones. It's far better for the environment. And it's produced by sustainable farming. There was also something, just becoming wise, just doing a little bit of research. A few years ago, I found out that that actually one of my favorite things to eat is Reese's peanut butter cups. I mean, it's a spiritual experience. Thank you. I see people nodding. As you should be. And I learned that Hershey's actually, in doing a little bit of research, Hershey's actually received a really, really poor grade in the way that it responds to the environment, the way that they harvest their beans, and there was some really concerning things about Hershey's. And so I thought to myself, okay, I'm not going to have. I know this is sacrificial. This is me sacrificial, right? I'm not going to eat any more Hershey's peanut butter cups. And I didn't for my daughter will attest that it's true. I didn't for like 3 or 4 years. And then I did some more research, and Hershey's had actually changed their methods because enough people, because of me. No, because enough people, I was eating a lot of them beforehand. But I don't think it was me. I think a lot of people realize that, hey, if I change what I buy, you know, you're actually giving an affirmation of business practice when you buy a certain product. And when you remove that stamp of approval, then oftentimes companies will change their practice. And now there's like a B+ rating on Hershey's, on the way that they're with their environmental stamp. So we need to talk a little bit about what we're going to ask from these folks today.
Okay, I just want to put in one quick plug about repairing the damage.
Okay.
Make your backyard a wildscape. Make it friendly to all the critters. The lizards and the frogs and the bugs and the bees. They're not after you. I mean, they need a home, and we have built over their homes. So make it, the homeowners association won't get on you if it's in the backyard. And you can let the wildflowers go to seed right there, and they'll rebloom for you, okay? And the other one is, this came to my mailbox. I'm really concerned about the bees. We have lost 40% of our bee population. And if the bees go, so do our food. So make sure you've got those plants in your backyard that feed the bees, and you can give to the Natural Resources Defense. They're highly recommended by Charity Navigator if you want to help in a larger kind of thing. They work for sustainable farming and the sorts of things that will help the bees.
So we want to leave you with one last question. There's a little piece of paper that's on your table.
Yep.
And that question is, what is the one thing you commit to do to reduce waste in your household? What is one thing?
Y'all, consider food. Of all the food grown in this country, 40% is thrown away. That's almost half. And 20% of that goes into the trash in your house and mine. Figure out a way you can not throw away so much food. Just a suggestion.
Thank you, Miss Elaine, for being a part of our conversation today. Let's come to the communion table together.